Welcome to my video on surface area of cylinders. Okay, so we're going to be looking at what shapes make up a cylinder and how the formula is the way it is. And then we're actually going to practice how to use the formula. So to start here, it says a cylinder is made by putting two circles and a rectangle together. To find the surface area of a cylinder, we work in two parts. So this net shows that there are two circles on a cylinder. Thus, we find the area of one circle, then multiply by 2. Okay, so you can see the picture here. We have a rectangle and two circles. So the rectangle, when I fold it up, that makes it around, the area around, and then the circles make the top and the bottom. So what I want to show you real quick is an animation that will help you see how this is broken down. So let me go ahead and get this video to play. So you can see here that it's broken up into two circles. So that's what you'll see, the 2 pi r squared. So why is this called 2 pi r? Well, this is called 2 pi r is because when I roll it up, it makes a circle. And circumference is the distance around the circle. So if pi times d is actually the formula for circumference, but we know that if you double the radius, you get the diameter. So that's why it's saying that this length is 2 pi r. And of course, we have the height here. So if we do 2 pi r times h, that will get the area of the rectangle. And if we do 2 times pi r squared, that will get the area of both squares. So let's go back to the notes here. Whoops. And so part 1 was looking at here, the area of two circles. Now we're going to look at the folded rectangle, which I just kind of spoke about. So to find the area of the folded rectangle, we need to know the height, which will be given, and the length around the circle needed. That's what we need to find. So the distance around the circle is known as circumference, and that's what I just had explained there when we looked at that video. And one way to represent circumference is 2 pi r. It can also be represented by pi times d. So we multiply the circumference 2 pi r and the height to get the area of the rectangle. So we call the area of the folded rectangle 2 pi r h. So when we combine these two parts, we get the total surface area. So we have 2 pi r h plus 2 pi r squared, or this is the one right here that you will see on your formula sheet, 2 pi r squared plus 2 pi r h. Now both of these formulas are acceptable because all this is using the commutative property of addition. So I can change both of these parts and I will still get the same answer because the 2 pi r squared, even if I move it over here, is still attached together, and the 2 pi r h, if I move it over here, is still attached together. So when I do these, more than likely I'll start with 2 pi r squared because that's what you'll see on your formula sheet. But if you do the 2 pi r h first, is it wrong? Absolutely not. So let's turn the page and use the formula to find the surface area. So the first step I want to do here is I always like to write the formula first. So since we're doing surface area, I'm going to write surface area equals 2 pi r squared plus 2 pi r h. Now when I look at the picture, I see that this dot is connected to a line segment that goes halfway across the circle, so that tells me that this is the radius. And when I look at from top of the circle to the bottom of the circle, that tells me the height, so this is 24 feet. So now I'm going to replace each symbol or letter in the formula. So I'm going to start with 2 times pi, which is 3.14, times the radius squared. So I'm going to write 3 squared. And I'm going to bracket this off just like I did when I did the surface area of a rectangular prism. Now, I'm going to do the 2 pi RH. So 2 times 3.14 times the radius, which is 3, times the height, which is 24. Once again, I'm going to put brackets around it. Now I'm going to use my calculator here, and I can do 2 times 3.14 times 3, and I can hit the x squared button. After I hit the x squared button, I have to hit equals. If I don't hit equals, your calculator will say the answer is 9, because it doesn't multiply these together until you hit equals. So it'll just tell you what 3 squared is, and the answer to this part is not 9. So that wouldn't make any sense. Now, let's say you're doing this at home and you don't have a calculator with an x squared button. All you have to do when you type this in is do 2 times 3.14 times 3 times 3. Because if the exponent is 2, that means you multiply it by itself. So you can just type it in as 3 times 3 instead of 3 squared if you don't have the exponent button. Okay, so when I type this in, I get 56 and 52 hundredths plus 452 and 16 hundredths. Now, I have to add those two parts together. So I'm combining the area of the circle plus the area of the rectangle. And that will give me 508 and 68 hundredths. Now I want to show you how to round to the nearest tenth. So we're going to round this answer to the nearest tenth by underlining the 6, which is in the tens place. And I'm going to look to the right. If that number is 5 or above, I give it a shove. If it's 4 or below, I let it go. So since 8 is 5 or above, I'm going to give the 6 a shove, and I will have 508 and 7/10 feet squared. And my label here is squared because I am finding the surface area. Surface area is always squared. Okay, so let's look at example number 2. So now it's tilted over, but it's still the same thing. So to find the radius, I'm looking at the circle, okay? So I notice that this goes halfway across, so I know that that's the radius. And remember, the height is from the top of the circle to the bottom of the circle. So even though this is tilted over, this is my height. So now I'm going to write the formula. Surface area equals 2 pi r squared plus 2 pi RH. Okay, now I'm going to substitute the numbers in. So I'm going to write 2 times 3.14 times 4.3 squared. And I'm going to bracket that in. And now I'm going to do the other part. I see plus 2 times 3.14 times 4.3 times 12, which is the height. And I'm going to bracket it in. Now be careful here, because if we're using dots for multiplication, make sure it's in the middle, and make sure if you're using a decimal that it's really close to the bottom of the number. Okay, now I need to calculate each part. So remember, I'm going to type this in as 2 times 3.14 times 4.3, hit the x squared button, and then hit equals. And you get 116 and 1,172 10,000ths. Plus, and I'm going to type this part into my calculator just the way it is, and I get 324 and 48 thousandths. And notice I didn't round. Yeah, I'm not going to round until I get to my final answer. So I'm going to add those together, and I get 440 and 1,652 10,000ths. Now, what number is in the tens place? Hopefully you said the 1, so I'm going to underline the 1 and look to the right. If it's 5 or above, I give it a shove. If it's 4 or below, I let it go. And since it's 5 or above, I'm going to give it a shove. So I'm going to write 440 and 2/10 centimeters squared, because remember, area is squared. Now, this next one, if you want to pause the video after I do the first part, that would be great to see if you can actually do it on your own. Okay, I'll leave that option up to you. So, the first thing I'm going to do is write the formula because I'm doing surface area. So surface area equals 2 pi r squared plus 2 pi rh. Okay, now I'm going to look at the picture and I'm going to look for the circle and try to locate the radius. Now this time I notice my line goes all the way across the top of the circle. So that is measuring the diameter. But if you look at the formula, I don't have D in the formula, I have R. So you remember from our previous note sheet on volume of a cylinder, we said that the radius is half the diameter. So what is half a 10? Hopefully you said 5. So the radius is 5 inches, write that down. The height is from the top of the circle to the bottom, so I'm going to put an H next to the 8. And I'm going to plug in the numbers. So 2 times 3.14 times 5 squared. And then I'm going to bracket that in. Plus 2 times 3.14 times 5 times 8. And I'm going to bracket it in. Now, quick review once again. If I'm typing this into my calculator, I do 2 times 3.14 times 5, and I hit the x squared button. And that will give me 157. And just a reminder, if you don't have the x squared button at home, you would type in 5 times 5 when you get to this part. Whoops. Okay, now type this part into your calculator and you would get 251 and 2/10. And when I add those together, I get 408 and 2/10. And since I said we were rounding to the nearest tenth, and this number already ends in the tenths place, then we are already rounded. So I'm going to write inches squared. Now, this is just a reminder when you are rounding. If it says round to the nearest tenth, you only have to round it to the nearest tenth if there are more than 2 place values after the decimal. If there's only 1 place value, you're good to go. If your answer comes out to be a whole number, you're good to go. So when it says to round to the nearest tenth, you only have to round if there's more than 2 place values after the decimal. Okay, that concludes our notes on surface area of a cylinder. I hope you have a great day.